In today's video, I'm going to show you the easiest way to get from here to here. And this is my favorite kind of job, I have to say, because you look like a winner, the result speaks for itself, and yet the amount of effort that underpins this kind of transformation is rock bottom. This is part one of my three-part series on busting rust, and it's aimed primarily at you if you are the home gamer coming to grips with this pernicious problem. So in today's video, we're going to deal with stripping rust off whatever you need to restore. Cylinder heads or body panels, engine blocks, hand tools like this. It doesn't matter, dude. It's all the same problem, and we're dealing with this today. In part two, we're going to deal with spray-on paint-like coatings that impart maximum protection. Which ones are right for which applications? Because otherwise you'll be at some retail store, you'll be looking at 30 products up on the wall. They're all going to be the best one according to the label, and drilling down, getting to the bottom of which is best for your particular application is more than 80% of that battle. So that's part two. Part three is going to be all of those things that you can't paint but which you need to prevent corroding. I'm talking about hand tools, the table on your drill press or your milling machine, vices, steel bench tops, all of that stuff. Precision tools that have to remain bare, because if you did paint them, then the paint would prevent them from being accurate enough to do the job, kind of thing. So that's in part three. Links in the description. Now, I also want you to get a great deal right now for the next 2 weeks. So I've been negotiating like crazy in the background with CRC and Auto One. So from the 1st of August until the 15th of August at midnight, 2025, you'll be getting 25% off the best products for doing this particular job, for waging this particular war. Full details in the description. Now, I will say that if you own a fat cave, it can be any kind of fat cave. It doesn't have to be a ridiculous one like this with a statue of Darth Vader in it and other non-essential accoutrements. It could just be a milk crate with a few hand tools and a battery drill, and maybe, if you want to cheat death every weekend, an angle grinder. You're at war, and the enemy is rust. And the news flash here is that rust really can't be beaten. It's not a war that humanity can win. You can win individual battles, skirmishes, sure. We can keep rust at bay. But humanity spends all of this time and effort ripping iron ore out of the ground, and that's just rust in a rock, let's face it. And then we turn it industriously into steel and cast iron and things of that nature. And as soon as it emerges from the mill, it spends the rest of its existence industriously striving to turn back into rust. Hakuna Matata, circle of life, whatever, circle of rust, certainly. All we can hope to do at home or in industry is to inflict maximum pain and suffering on the enemy. And we'd like to do that with as few casualties as possible on our side. I think we can all agree on that. So if you've got something old like this and you want to turn it into something shiny like this, or something old like this, and you want to turn it into something shiny like that, then how do you do that? What's the easiest way of doing it? There's more than one way to skin this particular cat, all right? One way is just mechanical abrasion. You can use a wire brush. It can be a handheld wire brush if you want to work up a sweat or get nice and toasty in winter, or it can be a stop rattling, whatever thing you are, stop it. I hate that. It can be a rotary wire brush on your angle grinder. Wear eye protection, because otherwise, right, 250 kilometers an hour, you're not going to see it, and you're not going to be able to move out of the way. You could use a flap disc on flat plate or things of this nature as well. You could use acid. Acid is really good for removing rust and stripping mill scale, but the problem with acid is it's kind of dangerous stuff. You know, muriatic acid or hydrochloric acid. You want the PPE solution for that because you don't want it splashing in your eyes particularly. You want to wear gloves and all of that stuff. If you do it inside, in the middle of winter, you'd like to be nice and toasty, maybe in your shed with a bit of a fire going. If you use concentrated acids inside, you will be releasing acid vapor everywhere and every bare metal surface will corrode. Okay, so use stronger acids outside. You can use vinegar as well. Vinegar works pretty well, but your whole fat cave smells like a fish and chip shop for the next 3 weeks. And all of these acid things, including vinegar, they keep eating away at the steel, all right? So if you want to preserve the steel but just remove the rust, acid is not a particularly good solution for you. And there is a safety dimension to using it, all right? So these are the other options. And obviously, if you use mechanical abrasion, particularly power tool kind of abrasion for rust, then you're going to be coating your whole workshop with orange dust, which gets old, and it's not really good for your health either. So you need to have a breathing protection solution for that. Metal dust, I think if we got 100 respiratory physicians and oncologists together, they'd all say on the spectrum of good things and bad things to breathe, metal dust is up the bad end of that spectrum, all right? So this is why I kind of like Evapo-Rust, right? Evapo-Rust is a really good CRC product. It's non-toxic, it's water-based, it's biodegradable, it's all of those things. And it's really clever as well if you understand basic chemistry. So essentially, I got a selection of all the really rusty stuff just lying around here decomposing, and I thought I'd do a bit of a demo with the Evapo-Rust where I was half in and half out or thereabouts with a lot of these components. So the thing about Evapo-Rust is its chemical cleverness arises because not only is it biodegradable and water-based and all of that stuff, but it strips the rust off the parts without getting into the underlying metal. So you won't be removing any good metal. You're just going to strip off rust. You're not going to be removing coatings either. So galvanized or cadmium, I guess. The only coating that Evapo-Rust will remove is bluing, because bluing is kind of thick rust chemically, all right? This stuff has one particular chemical agent in it called a chelating agent, which goes in. Chelating comes, C-H-E, lating, comes from a Greek word that means to claw. It basically just goes in and claws away the rust and drags it into the liquid, right? But to me, the really clever thing with Evapo-Rust is the next step of the process, which involves reading in between the lines. Chemistry is not a secret, just most people don't speak it, but it's got to have some organic molecule in here with a bunch of sulfur in it, because to get the rust that's been chelated out of the chelating agent, you've got to turn it into ferric sulfate or ferric sulfide, one of those. Anyway, they turn it into that and it just floats around in suspension, and it leaves the chelating agent free to go again. So you'll notice that it's a multiple use product, which is really good for the economy of using it. So don't throw it away is what I'm saying after your first crack. Just put it back in the bottle and go again. This is exactly what I did, and it's super clever, right? And you can see it's been effective on all kinds of steel. Super high carbon steel, like in the file, the rust came off that really well. You'll note, this is interesting too, it's a lot blacker, for example, than the medium sort of carbon steels that might be used for something like a wrench. And that's because even if it's a case-hardened file, there's a lot of carbon towards the surface. The black that comes out of some steel when it's treated with this stuff and vinegar is really just free carbon, right? And it just kind of brushes off. So what I've done essentially here is it's come out of the bath, and as soon as it comes out, it starts to flash rust. And what I did, just for demo purposes, right, is less than 60 seconds with an old chatty wire brush. And we're at a surface that is just right for painting or just right for bluing or just right for any other surface treatment. You could just spray it with some oily compound that will prevent it from rusting. So this is a really quick, easy, no-effort process. It's the middle of winter right now, so what I would say there is that the process is temperature dependent, like the speed of the process. It's going to work irrespective of the temperature, but it's going to be really slow if the temperature is lower than about 15 degrees. So I got up on the morning of the test, it's like 6 degrees or something, so pretty chilly. Certainly not t-shirt weather when I got up, and the water coming out of the tap is like 10 or 12 degrees kind of thing. So I just know that if I'm using Evapo-Rust like that, it's going to take, seemingly geologic time to do its thing. So I put it in my ultrasonic cleaner. It's a 10-litre cleaner, and I've got 2 little plastic containers full of Evapo-Rust. And I just turned up the wick on the heater to about 30 degrees and I left it overnight. So that's a nice, quick, no-effort solution. And I didn't use the ultrasound at all, okay? All I did was, out of the Evapo-Rust, dunk in the water, dry it off with a cloth, and then on one face, I gave it the wire brush treatment that you can see here. And on the other face, I just left it how it comes out of the vat after you dry it off, after a rinse. So you can see there's a little bit of incipient flash rust here and a little bit of staining where some bits of steel had carbon coming out of them more prolifically than other bits. All right, so you get a blotchy seal like that, but 30 to 60 seconds with a wire brush later and you're at essentially bare metal and good to go. Here's an example with a cold chisel that had been rusting since the dawn of time, and you can see this is the out of the vat solution just here. It's a bit splotchy, but 30 seconds with a wire brush, she's good for any sort of coating you'd like at this point. You could mask up the bevels and then just paint the rest, for example. That'd be easy. Or you could just leave it as is and spray it with something like, dude, it's a cold chisel. How important are the aesthetics after all, really? So there's that to consider. When we're talking about highly polished surface, like on these Morse tapers here, the rust got stripped off pretty well off there as well. This is a bit of a chatty Morse taper. It's spun in the receiver a couple of times here by the feel of things in a previous life. It's also a little bit splotchy on the just out of the vat side, but this is quickly cured and it returns to a reasonably serviceable surface finish pretty quickly. The other thing about Evapo-Rust, of course, is when we're talking about components with multiple faces and all kinds of internal bits and pieces that are really not that amenable to mechanical abrasion. Now, this bolt has been bent or in the fabrication process or in service, I'm not sure. But you can see that irrespective of the nut being in place, the Evapo-Rust has gone to work on it. It's pretty good. And all of these little bits that would be hard to get into with essentially anything, even a wire brush, they have been treated, like the inside of this round hole and the inside of this square hole. And also the notches, the little grooves in both of the jaws. I don't know if you can see that there, but anyway, they're all pretty effectively treated as well. Same thing with this lifting hook, which was looking a bit secondhand. I did the hook in its closed position, but the Evapo-Rust has gone into those faces. So when you think about the complexity of the curvature in something like a cylinder head or a cylinder block, the Evapo-Rust process is really good for that, because getting into ports and cast features, even around the lettering, can be really difficult without damaging the underlying material. You can see here that even the vestigial remaining chatty yellow paint on the hook hasn't been affected by the Evapo-Rust. So it's a great way of dealing with complex shapes without having to come to grips with how do we get right into there with some mechanical abrasion that doesn't destroy the stamping and lettering and underlying features in all of them. The only thing I would say is that all of these processes involving acid or chelating agents like in Evapo-Rust, they tend not to work particularly well if the part is oily. So if you're doing cylinder blocks or cylinder heads, you'll want a bath of degreaser as well, or components like this that were a bit greasy. You've got to spray them with degreaser, get rid of the degreaser, and then go into the Evapo-Rust for the best possible result. Now, this brings me to the next part of this problem, which could be, what if there's something that you need to treat and it's rusty, but you can't get there, or it's not amenable to being pulled out of service and into a bath? Like you've got to climb to the top of some radio mast or a windmill or whatever. You just want to get rid of the rust, but you don't want to disassemble something and carry it precariously down from, you know, the north face of the Eiger or something. Well, there's an alternative to liquid Evapo-Rust, which is this sort of spray-on gel. And I had a crack with that as well. I didn't have the north face of the Eiger handy, so I just used some old tools again. The process is, or at least the thing you're supposed to remember is, don't let the gel dry out. So couple of hours and keep it out of direct sunlight. So what I did was, with the old tools, I just put them in a plastic bag and then I gelled them up and I waited a bit. I actually went out and did, you know, normal life intervening stuff and came back about 4 hours later and then just wiped the gel off and had a bit of a brush with a wire brush and then sprayed them with some, what did I spray them with? Some of this Long Life. Okay, so that's toolbox ready, just like that, dude. In fact, the edge is still sharp enough to function as what a blacksmith would call a fuller, I suppose. So my crosscut chisel, same deal there. It's come up pretty nice, although the mill scale was not attacked by the gel particularly, which I don't mind because it's kind of protective. And then with the oily coating, this was blued, and I just wanted to have a crack with that. It's the splotchiest finish of the lot. I guess the blue was harder to attack. This was lightly rusted, so if that was a machine component, it's ready to go back into service. Even though there's a bit of, I'd call it tattooing there, you really can't feel the rusty bits or the bare bits on the other side also. Absolutely flat enough to go back into assembly, even on some machine that has to have vestigial precision about it. That would be just fine, dude. And you can see here that while the machine faces have been really well treated by the gel, the outside of the bar, which is just the mill scale finish, is essentially unaffected by the gel. Incidentally, I did put this round bar into the liquid test as well, and it was only there to see how the mill scale went. There's typically pretty thin mill scale on small hot rolled sections like this, and you can see the bit that was immersed. The rust came off in a big hurry, but it took a long time for the Evapo-Rust to make any sort of dent in the mill scale. We're talking 12 hours of immersion with the bath at about 28 or 30 degrees C here too. So if you've got a lot of mill scale to remove, Evapo-Rust might not be the sharpest tool in the shed for that, but it is absolutely brilliant for rust, which after all is its main purpose. If you're a fabricator and you want to look at a good way of getting rid of mill scale for welding and other fabrication, machining, whatever, I'd be thinking about an acid type solution for that, because I just know it's going to be a lot quicker. But if you just want to deal with rust and you want to restore old components, the Evapo-Rust is especially easy to use. Like, there's no big deal about any of that. You don't have to worry about the PPE, and the result kind of speaks for itself. Now, I also wanted to talk to you about this wrench, because I think we could agree that the war on rust has not been especially kind to this wrench. It was deeply pitted and heavily scaled, and yet this is the bit that came as is out of the vat. You can see that there's just a bit of surface rust, like flash rust, happening at the moment. And now on the other side, a few seconds with a wire brush and we're getting a bit of a sheen to it. So we could clear varnish that, or we could, I don't know, what do they call that stuff? Penetrol. We could put Penetrol on it. And although its best days as a wrench are well behind it, I could see this getting a second lease on life as a handle for a locker. That'd be the perfect workshop handle, or some trolley that has a piece of equipment on it, like the bandsaw just here, or the welding cart you've always wanted to build. Stuff like this is It's worth nothing at a flea market. You pick it up for $1 or something, and it's just the perfect whimsy, like it's doffing its cap to the engineers who designed it and the tradies who used it for 20 or 30 years, and you're not throwing it out. Like, there was a fair bit of embodied energy in this part, and it can serve several decades deployed in this different way, right? So what I'm saying is Evapo-Rust is a perfect way to clean up something like that without shining it up or aspiring to restore it to its former glory, which would look terrible anyway. We can see all of the damage that time and effort has done to the wrench, and yet it can be serviceable and in use. If you're going to restore something like old machine tools, like an old vise, an old one of these. You see these all the time that are in far worse condition than this one. If you've got a bath, like you got a 20-litre bucket full of Evapo-Rust, or, a 20-litre bucket with 15 litres of Evapo-Rust in it because Archimedes kind of thing, then you could immerse your old vise in that. And that means you wouldn't be taking a flapper disc to it. Yet the old paint would remain in place, and all the slings and arrows, the scuffs and all of that stuff that represent the 20 or 30, 40, 50, whatever years of faithful service that something like this has put in, that's going to remain. And yet you can clean it right up. All the metal will be back to paintable, like clear. You could clear coat it with penetrol or something of that nature, and it would look red hot and continue to serve well for decades to come. You might not even have to disassemble the whole thing. Like, do you really want to pull the lead screw out and get out your wire brush and have a crack? Or do you just want to treat it and then see what it's like and then see what else you need to do and, cosmetically fix it up after that and leave all of the evidence of its service just there, in plain sight so that other people can admire it as well. That is, if you allow other people in your fat cave. It's a deeply personal refuge from, the rest of the world, which can be from time to time quite trying, I know. And this is the thing, right? Fat caves are about mental health. And this kind of stuff, doing this kind of stuff, repurposing this kind of stuff, you could knock this pin out and get rid of this, movable part of the hook here and just turn this into, welder's third hand or something of that nature. It'd be a great way to impart a second life on something that is otherwise just a piece of scrap metal, So for all these reasons, I recommend the old Evapo-Rust. I'm seeing big vertical bath for cylinder heads or the half of a 44-gallon drum or something of that nature, just with a lid on top of it for engine blocks. If it's winter, you might even want to think about an immersion heater type solution for it so you can get it up to 20 or 30 degrees. But the thing that really swings it for me with Evapo-Rust is when I compare every other method that I might use to achieve this result on a rust-ravaged wrench, or not even as good as this result, and how much would I enjoy doing that? See, I'm not opposed to putting a wire wheel on an angle grinder and having a crack, and sometimes that is the best tool for the job, but not in this case because it's not going to get into every nook and cranny. The result's not going to be as good, and the entire workshop is going to be coated in orange dust, which, if I breathed any of it, is bad for my health. So there's that. I could use acid. That'll get into every nook and cranny, but acid and angle grinders have a few parallels. They're not that fun. You need a rock-solid PPE solution, and you don't get to make too many mistakes, do you? Whereas with Evapo-Rust, it's like having Walter White in a bottle. You can just get Walter as your apprentice and have him working for you diligently, doing chemistry in the corner while you get on with stuff that you actually enjoy, like standing in front of your lathe or your mill, turning perfectly serviceable steel into swarf kind of thing, or rebuilding an engine or a gearbox or a diff, or welding up a repair panel on a body shell that you have in a rotisserie, whatever. These things are all infinitely more fun than scraping rust off some part. And you only need about a litre of Evapo-Rust to give it a try. It comes in 1 litre bottles. You can buy it up to at least 20 litres. So if you want a big bath, they can certainly help you out. But 1 litre in a bath or a tube, that's all it takes, dude. Have a crack, see what it's like. 25% off at the moment. Thank you very much to CRC and Auto One for getting together with me on this to help you out with 25% off. Links in the description. Part 2 and Part 3 of this series also linked in the description. If you're watching this video as it is published, Part 2 and Part 3 are not published yet, but the links will work. And you can have a sneak peek before anybody else if you click them. Thank you very much for watching. Happy trails in your own fat cave dealing with rust. Hopefully it just got a whole lot easier.